Welcome everyone. As I said, this is our first global conversation series. It's being held by the WACE World Association, which is the international organisation dedicated to developing and expanding cooperative and work integrated education globally. Because I'm Australian, I'm bound to call it work integrated learning, but I think we all understand what we're talking about. My name is Judy Kay, and it's my pleasure to facilitate this session today. I work at RMIT in Melbourne, Australia, and it's 10 o'clock at night. So greetings from evening in Melbourne, and welcome to our Canadians who've just got up, and our Southern Africans and our Europeans in the middle of the day. I'm chair of the National Association Group, which is a group that brings together 8 national associations to work collaboratively through under the auspice of WACE. I'm also a past president and founder of ACEN. So today we have 4 leaders from 4 countries joining us to discuss how COVID-19 has impacted on WIL in their countries and what some of the strategies and implications that there might be. And those countries are UK today, Canada, Sweden and South Africa. So it's wonderful to see you all. So before we start, just a little bit of housekeeping. First of all, we've muted you all. Now, apologies for that. We don't normally mute people, but given so many people, we just need to do that to ensure that there's no extraneous noises that could interfere with our panel. At the end, we're hoping to have a Q&A that Nora McRae, who's at the top of the screen, and my screen anyway, who's from the University of Waterloo, Canada. And that's going to be the home of WACE after July, when WACE will be moving from its headquarters in Boston to the University of Waterloo in Canada. So thank you very much to Nora, who's going to curate the Q&A and has organised a Zoom link for us all today. As I said, we're recording this session and we'll make it available on the WACE website next week, so that if you've got colleagues that might be interested, please point them to that. And if at any stage that transmission starts to break up, it didn't in our first session, which was for Asia this morning, it didn't do that, but if it does, the advice is to turn your video off to see if that works, or if that fails, go out and come back in. Sometimes that works as well. But if all fails, the recording will be on the website. So let's start. So the topic today is Global Perspectives, Strategies and Impact, Work Integrated Education and COVID-19. Now, we all know, I think all of us are experiencing unprecedented times globally through COVID-19 pandemic, which has really had huge impacts on all of our lives. I'm working from home and I can see a whole pile of you are, probably most of you are working at home. So every facet of our life has been transformed or disrupted as a result of the pandemic. And that's had significant impacts on our tertiary education systems globally. Certainly has in my country, and I'm sure we will hear what's been happening in the countries that are featured today. So today we're going to look at this pivot that's had to happen for many of our students to either withdraw from placements or to pivot online to somehow do their work integrated learning, their work integrated education in some other way. And so what we're interested in is exploring how that's impacted and looking to the future. So we've got 4 leaders from 4 national associations with us today. We've got Frances Dominique Walker from ASSET. Can you wave, Frances? Where are you? She's up the top of my screen. We've got Dr. Roland Brick from SASKI from South Africa. We have Kara Czech from the CWIL from Canada. And we also have Christina Johansson from Villa, the network in Sweden. So what we're going to do is we're going to ask our panelists a few questions, and we're going to then ask you to put any questions that you've got in the chat, and we'll get to those at the end of their answers, hopefully about 1/4 to the hour, whichever hour you're in, because we're all in different hours. Okay, so let's start. The first question is we'll ask Frances from the UK to answer the question, which is around what were the key impacts on work integrated learning in your country as a result of the pandemic, and what strategies have been put in place to respond to those challenges. Frances, could you outline them for us, please?
Right, good afternoon from the UK. Hello, everybody. So what did we do? The first thing was to gather the troops, to be honest. We pulled all the asset members together online to find out what was actually going on, what was the lived experience on the ground. And we've kept that conversation going. One of the things we found was communication across all the organisations, all the higher education institutions was absolutely key, so that we could share and maintain good practice. So what we did, bring them all together, so March, April, and we've got another one next week, so that will be our June offering, and then we'll have a further one in September. Bring everybody together, find out what's going on. What was going on? Well, one of the major things was we found that placements were working-based learning was being cancelled or moved online, and that has an impact on, well, what are we going to do with the year? So students who had completed most of their year, that's okay, we could accredit that a bit, and those who were about to go, hopefully they were able to move online. So what we saw was a lot of organisations who hadn't gone into, as we refer, fellow, so that they hadn't taken a break. So what they were doing was creating virtual placements, virtual work integrated learning. And from our perspective in universities, we were adopting and adapting our assessments to make sure that the students could still get credit. And where any credit was missing, creating some additional learning. So it was bending, flexing, working with our quality assurance, working with our external examiners. That's what we did.
There we are. I forgot to unmute. Thank you so much. Roland, perhaps you could talk from the South African perspective.
Thank you so much, Judy, for the opportunity. With the COVID-19, the economic impact and the regulations for return to the work make work integrated learning students the last to be allowed back. The employers want their full-time staff mentors and supervisors back first. The potential union resistance because staff might be retrenched because of companies going into liquidation, but while students are being paid by the sector education and training authority, so they might want to retain the WIL students in an attempt to save the business. So the challenges including ensuring quality of mentorship and exposure to learning outcomes required. But the higher education institutions need to be proactive and engage in activities to strengthen the complementary teaching and learning strategies. So these learning strategies, including simulations, the employability enhancements, such as the JICA initiative, and other WIL modalities. For example, our tourism and hospitality industry needs to look at a total different WIL modality during COVID-19. The reason for that is that the tourism and hospitality industry has suffered the most. As all the borders were closed, all the destinations, even inter-province travel was prohibited. So students are stuck either at home or in their provinces where they were launched. So that's a large amount of workers with experience will be flooding the market as salaries are forced to lower. So currently Africa and South Africa is looking at retrenchments, short time, salary cuts, and we even anticipate a rise in unemployment. Currently, our employment is 29%, but we anticipate that it's going to rise up to 50%. And that's excluding the youth not in employment or the students in education or training. And as everyone is knowing, our social economy outlook is very negative. The currency is downgraded to junk status. So the inadequate supply of electricity makes the growth of the manufacturer very expensive. So the government did confirm that the Sector Education and Training Authority can pay an extended placement, but that will also now have another impact on the 2021 cohort, and that will not accommodate the budget as restricted. So the National Student Financial Aid Scheme has agreed to provide top-up assistance to qualifying students. So yes, we're looking at different modalities. So we're changing the whole shift of students in the working placement and looking more at simulations, project-based learning, and that type of thing, and getting industry more involved to doing more mentorship, online Skype meetings with the students, and so forth.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that very, real painting the picture. Thank you very much. Cara, can we hear about Canada? Thanks.
Good morning, everybody from the beautiful Niagara wine region in Canada. It was interesting to start to prepare for this because it also gave some reflection on what we've been through over the last nine weeks. And it's been, it brings me back to the beginning of, I think, where Sewell jumped in was on Friday the 13th, which is funny enough. For those of you familiar with the connotation of that, we received a call from our employer partners that we were engaged with, saying that because of COVID, they were looking at canceling all those hours. This is a major employer in Canada. And thankfully, we had the relationship that they called us and said, what do you think? And our response was, please don't. So we had to come together very quickly to say, we need to take some statements from Sewell. As a lead organization in Canada, we're working integrated learning. It was, we were really well positioned for this from an association perspective. We're in the midst of our first ever national integrated learning month. We had just launched our Quality Council. We had just launched our National Resource Hub, and built on years and years of work being done by Sewell members to help the association move along and be eyes of the country, both from the government's perspective as well as our members. So it was great that we were well positioned, but this call kind of brought to us the realities of what we were dealing with. Basically, our board got together. We made a couple of announcements right away. So one from our accreditation council, we have programs. We want to make sure the institutions and employers felt comfortable making decisions that they needed to based on what was happening. So things like shortening work terms, things like the 40 remote work, how to do that. So we made some statements there. People were able to make calls and not feel their accreditation going to suffer. Also, we call kind of a plea to not cancel work terms instead to help students to do remote work. And on top of that, they couldn't do that, then to not cancel those placements to move them to June 1st, just to give some breathing room to our employer partners as we didn't, such a time of uncertainty. So that was a really an important decision because we started to see a lot of national employers pause and not making decisions right away. And also we helped those who were doing remote work that we could showcase how we were doing that. So we started a social media campaign called Will for Remote. It's on our website, or our COVID resources was shared on social media, I think, across Canada and around the globe, to help to onboard students where possible, knowing that not every entry can do that, but also just to be able to help save as many as possible. What we're seeing in Canada, so the other thing that we've done, what happened really quickly because of some of this, was that we started to do calls much like the UK. We were doing them twice a week, and then we went to weekly, now we're bi-weekly, where we call them Sewell Town Halls. We've included everybody. You don't have to be a Sewell member. We just wanted anybody in the Will community to be able to engage with us. And that also proved to be really helpful because we had people that were engaging with it that hadn't necessarily engaged with us as an association, but truly to have all the voices that were there. We started to do some pulse data, and thank you to Judy and Patty and Watt Case for the help that they've been to help us do this. So every 2 weeks, we've been just trying to get data that's in real time. We're not trying to make it too cumbersome, because data, especially at the beginning, was just so stagnant if you didn't get it out there right away, and everything was changing so quickly. As of our last data collection, we reported that co-op, specifically from co-op, is down 23% across the country. We're starting to notice that the college system in Canada is being hit much harder than the university systems. Some provinces are being hit more harder than others. There's a Stats Canada survey, crowdsourcing survey, of about 100,000 students, and those students have said 35% of them have had an affected or postponed work term. So really what we did was we started to collaborate with our members. We were creating resources and publishing resources in both official languages as fast as we could, really trying to get the pulse of what was going on. And the other thing that we worked so closely with the federal government, if you don't know, that the federal government a few years ago made a huge announcement into investment in work integrated learning. 800 million of that investment was for placement specifically. So we're working really closely with the federal government to make that money work in this time. And the government has announced a variety of flexibility measures, which has really helped employers be able to continue to employ students and pay them. And one of the flexibility measures is that they allowed institutions to hire students. As many of us know, we know how Will works well. So we were able to hire students ourselves, which was not something we were able to do in the past. So we're starting to see the benefits of that as well, and continue to work with the federal government. So I think for the most part, it's really been about adjusting and aligning and advocating and being quick to respond as much as possible. So that's a bit of the
Thank you, Cara.
Canadian landscape.
Thank you. We might now ask, thank you very much for that, and we might now move to Sweden. Christina.
Hello, nice to see you all from all different countries. I will give you some bits and pieces, both from a research perspective and the Swedish national, I would say, catastrophic situation maybe. As you all probably know, we are the black sheep. We don't do like the rest of the world. We don't lock down. We have social distancing. It means that we have over 35,000 confirmed cases, and today we have 4,200 deaths and rising. So we have a real big problem with the issue of people getting sick and die in this disease. So this of course has made a lot to do, has made a lot on the national level, but also at the university level. So in last week, all the vice chancellors in Sweden had a meeting discussing how will we approach the autumn and all the teaching at the autumn falls. And we have about 40% of the university says that we will go online. 40% of the rest of the university says no, we will start having people in the university locations in August. And 20% say we don't know. So this is the Swedish way of trying to make some kind of steering directions about what's going to happen. We from a research point of view, we have 2 research projects coming up or actually ongoing. We have a big research project with 9 countries in Europe looking at the staff and the students about going online. What's happening with the students and the staff when we are forced to go into this rapid technology in online learning? What happens with the teaching values, the quality, but what also happens with you as a person when you need to do something else than you want to do, so to speak. We also have a huge evaluation from the Swedish Defense Army that they want to look at what have the army provided to handle this situation, and how is the health ministry actually all the decisions made about COVID, what was written in them, and what was the outcome and the effectiveness of dealing with all this kind of decision making from the Swedish Defense Office and the health ministry. And of course also from Anders Tegnell, who is the epidemiologist of Sweden right now. So what's happening in Sweden that we didn't have any lockdown. It means that it's been more or less the same. The only restriction we have is that you can only be 49 people in public spaces, parties, restaurants, etc. And you should keep on what they call social distancing. It should be 2 meters from each person. As you can see in the numbers, this hasn't been working really well. So we will see what's happening here. But what's interesting from a research perspective is, of course, what happens when you get into this kind of area. You have this really rapid movement. You're going from one situation to another. And what's interesting for us as a researcher is what will stick when we go back to the new normal, because I will never think we'll go back to normal. We go back to new normal. What will stick on us and what kind of traces will it leave? We have in our university, one way they have dealt with this is that they have actually assigned a group, not only the technological group that will enhance that Zoom and the computers are working. They have also created a group of 12 people that has been the pedagogical help group, so to speak. And this to try to manage this kind of rapid movements. The group, I have been a part of the group is now actually not needed that more. So people are actually doing what they're supposed to do. But one very contradictory way of dealing with this is they say, we need a group of pedagogical and technological people. At the same time, the members of the board of the university says that it's good enough that is on the agenda right now. We are happy with good enough. But I mean, for how long can you be happy with good enough in a university context? If we're going to a new normal where technology is the one factor that's driving university, and the placements will go online, etc., what will be the quality and what will be good enough? So that is a question that we are actually trying to hire PhD students to investigate right now, these conflicting discourses in the university sector. I think I will stop there right now. So we have time for more questions.
Thank you very much, Christine. I think we've had a very rich array of all the different impacts that are happening across the 4 countries. Now we're going to turn to a different question. So, can we see what are the benefits? Can we see any benefits coming out of this particular period? And how do you see WIL evolving? I think Christina started to touch on that, but maybe we could explore that briefly a bit more. We've got a few minutes for each person before we then, I can see that we've got some questions in the chat, which is great. So this would be an opportunity for you to quickly put some more questions in the chat, if you have any. So let's start with Frances. Benefits, opportunities, what way forward? Frances.
Thank you. In terms of benefits, just to echo what Cara was saying, which is greater collaboration across higher education institutions. We're seeing so much sharing of resources, top tips, and a real working and pulling them together. We are seeing a greater engagement with work integrated learning. So more members are coming on board. People that we haven't seen at our events before are coming on board, and new members are coming on board as well. So that's, we're seeing a widening of the community, and it's incredibly exciting to not just expand it across our nations, but expand it globally as well. So this is a fabulous opportunity. But in terms of like, what is the new normal? And one of the major questions that is now coming up that we are starting to explore, and this is the opportunity, is, okay, so this is how we have delivered preparation and development for work integrated learning. This is how we've pulled opportunities together in the past. But just to echo Christina, new normal. This is, whatever happens over the next few months is going to be the new normal. And we need to, what we're exploring is, okay, we've prepared in that way. Now this is the opportunity to start thinking about how we prepare and develop our students for this new environment, this 2D environment where, like, reading people is so different and such a challenge, and like, work integrated learning is very much about gathering and developing those experiences, but this is quite different. So we're really starting to explore that and are very excited about the opportunities. And Christine has mentioned the challenges of working in this environment, and we're exploring that as well. So we're also doing some research on that. So opportunity for collaboration. But the new normal, the new student, the new perspective is where we're going. And the thing that we have the biggest opportunity with now is flex, is of being.
Okay, Fran, I think you're right.
Okay, global institution, being able to share it.
Okay, sorry, I think we nearly lost you, but I think you were talking about flex. Yep. Okay, I think we'll move on because I think we're losing you, Frances. Rolene, would you like to answer any benefits that you can see? Obviously a very difficult situation in South Africa.
I can see a couple of opportunities and benefits for South Africa, specifically with the unemployment and helping of unemployment, is the possibility include greater emphasis on entrepreneurship and self-employment programs and online mentoring for students, and the integration of projects where the integration, what I mean by integration there is where the projects will be given and it will be integrated projects and assessments by the industry itself to ensure that the objectives of the work integrated learning are maintained. But then another opportunity that I see from a researcher point of view is the need to establish graduate attributes post-COVID-19 in each sector of the economy must be empirically researched. That's another opportunity that I see. But the best benefit, I think, for South Africa and for the Africa continent as a whole is the possibility to include greater entrepreneurship and self-employed students and programs.
Fabulous, thank you. We'll move on to Cara now, in some opportunities or benefits from the Canadian perspective.
Yeah, so I would agree with my colleagues of the things that were just mentioned regarding the benefits of collaboration and looking at new ways of doing things. I think one of the things COVID has done is changed our way of thinking in a lot of ways. Is all the things that we've said, you can't do that, or how would we do that? It sped us up so quickly. Even if you think about how we're doing this before, it would, you know, now it's so natural to think of how do you bring together a global community to talk about work integrated learning. So I think that's one of the things that's removed our barriers, and just some of these barriers obviously before were very real, but also just barriers of thinking, because it's had to challenge us to think differently. So, you know, for example, in Canada, where we have a very strong accreditation and our guidelines to think differently of how we still keep that quality and at the same time be able to flex. The other thing is as we move into other, you know, a variety type of wills and having quality indicators there, so that's speeding us up there too. It's work that we were already doing, but it's how quickly and how important it is to have that for our other types of work integrated learning, not just co-op. So these are some of the things that will help our system be able to say, yes, this is a good experience, and then also be able to look at how the different experiences fit in different contexts. So I think that that is really helpful. We have a lot of conversations about virtual versus remote, because those things become very important as they become confused. A virtual internship is very different than a remote internship. So we are having some of those conversations about language and what that means, because we have some schools who are creating some amazing virtual reality opportunities. And we just want to make sure that we're clear about what those are. So these are some opportunities. I think it's with many things with COVID, it's made us think differently. It's made us react much quicker, and it's also just made us think in a way that we can't do that is no longer really a statement. It's how do we do it, and I think that that's been a really good benefit.
Thank you, Cara. And finally, Christina, some opportunities from the Swedish perspective.
Now is the pedagogue is talking, not the researcher. Of course, you can see some opportunities with this, and one of my wishes is that we frame from this 20 years plus go back to this kind of very narrow and strict thinking about learning assessments, learning objectives, and how we should move from one person to a checkbox list for 3 years. Maybe we can start to discuss lifelong learning in different contexts. Maybe we can talk about spaces instead of places, and get back to what we actually want the students to be. Good and qualified thinkers, critical thinkers, with a lot of depth and knowledge and wisdom, and not only checkbox on the curricula. This is the pedagogue talking. This is my dream. But we also have, I need to promote my HR program at University of West right now, because we started 6 months ago to create a virtual consulting firm called WILL. And it means that the students from day 1 to 3 years, they collect all the data to this consulting group. They have everything from health plan, rehab plans, how you hire, how you fire, how you make salaries, etc. Everything is put on this web platform for the students to pick. But of course, they also have practical. They go out physically to the world out there, but they can get a lot of the reference data that is picked from inside the university and from actual read firms outside, and put documents in a database they use. And this is one way of thinking, how can I create these kind of spaces where students can learn in different spaces and places, not always need to move from one position to another, or location to another. So I can see a lot of opportunities with this, actually.
Thank you. We might now, I can see a number of questions in the chat box, so we've got some lovely time. We can have a discussion. Nora, would you be able to take us through the questions?
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you to all the speakers. Wonderful insights and great perspectives. Really appreciate it. Some nice questions coming in on the chat, and I'll just start in the order that I saw them. First of all, first question was, are people seeing differences between how national or national or home employers are engaging with remote work terms as opposed to transnational or international employers. Any comments from anybody on that one?
I'm sorry, Nora, you're breaking up here with me. So can you take it again?
I would never break up with you, Christina.
Oh, sorry, but some.
Any differences between how national employers are dealing with this situation versus international employers with respect to willingness to have students work remotely?
I can maybe come in on that, Nora. One of my groups are working with a company in New York, and the company in New York is doing exactly the same what the South African companies are doing for the students with the project-based learning. They have these meetings and they are on the WhatsApp group with the students, participating in helping the students and guiding the students through the process. So I think from a project-based learning, it's exactly the same. I don't think there's a major difference. I don't think I don't know any other work integrated learning modalities. Maybe one of the other people can comment on the other modalities.
Thank you, Marlene. Any other comments from the speakers?
I think that what we're seeing and what we'll probably continue to see is that the barriers of location are actually coming down. So where what we've seen, for example, is tech companies that only recruit in one particular area and now have tech talent that is working from home. So it doesn't really matter about some of the restrictions that would have stopped them from being able to bring people in from other countries. So I know from some of the things that I've seen with a couple just blogs that I follow about Silicon Valley and what's been hit very hard, but also looking at different areas that are pulling from different talent in a variety of ways and opening it up to places where they don't typically go. So I think that is something, as long as remote work continues to be supported, that we'll start to see is that the lines of where you find your talent is going to be different, and students will have more opportunities to work internationally but from home, which is something that we have to wrap our heads around, and I'm sure that there's lots of regulations and as you look at how you pay them and everything, but I do think that is something that we're going to see, and anybody that already understands how important it is to have international talent and have global perspectives for their organization, that is going to be something we see more and more of.
Great, thanks, Kara. I'm going to move on to the next question. There's quite a bit of chat and back and forth around this concept of collaboration and how could we do international collaboration, having online projects that students from different jurisdictions are engaging in. What might we do about that? And there were some suggestions, so I don't know if any of the speakers would like to speak about international collaborative projects between students.
I'm only going to jump in because I've been trying to read what's going on the side. But I'm not sure it sounds like there's some great ideas and some great examples there, but I think this is where WACE may have an opportunity as we see, again, the borders aren't as defined. So if there's something that we could do to work together, whether that is a board in which we have students that can access, just a thought off the top of my head, I'm not sure how that all works, but it sounds like we have a variety of people that have some best practices. But I think that this is where WACE could probably play a really strong role.
Great. Okay, let me move on to another question. There was a specific question around teacher practice and what people are doing in different countries. So I think this is the teacher practicum, getting teachers ready to be able to go into schools, where this is more difficult during this situation. It's the same in many health disciplines as well, social work and others. So Frances, did you want to comment on this question?
Yes, this actually came up at a number of our meetings. We're seeing a lot of practice continuing in an online environment and remaining in a supported environment. Teaching is still going on. I'm sure it is all over the world. So those experiences are still happening. Yes, it's a challenge. And in the UK, we're moving back into schools from next week. So from the 1st of June, we're starting to go back in. And so that sort of hits a health and safety issue, which we are very carefully monitoring. But yeah, it's still happening. It hasn't gone away. And people, as Kara said, barriers are starting to come down because opportunities, it doesn't matter where you are, that you can still provide that support and guidance. So it's still happening. It's just different.
Thank you, Frances. Other comments on this question?
Christina.
Sorry, Christina, you can go first.
Thank you. Our teacher program has this kind of distance learning right now. They don't go to practicum or anything like that. But our university actually made a special, a special decision for the healthcare programs. So our nurses and also health workers, they need a short update of the knowledge, for instance, to work on the intensive care. They go actually to the campus and have regular teaching. But that's only for the clinical learning center, so to speak. But all the rest of the university studies is on remote right now. So no practicum or something like that. It stopped.
Okay. Rolene, did you want to add something?
Yes, there are some schools in the Gauteng area that I know they use the practicum students, the teachers, to do online teaching for their schools. So they do small videos, and they also do simulations of their classrooms, and then the simulations are evaluated by their peers.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you. Okay, another question here. Has anyone noticed employers operating differently with their students and online learning, or having students working remotely using methods such as agile methods or anything like that? Any differences with how employers are operating and engaging with students? Frances.
Yeah, we're seeing quite a lot of engagement actually. So our very large employers, things like organisations such as Santander, which have a global reach especially, so they're increasing things like mentoring and one-to-one support with the students. So we are seeing this increasing. We have a significant amount of web-based businesses anyway. So what we have seen is where there is a specialism in online delivery, those companies have seen a significant increase, which means more opportunities for our students.
Okay, great. Thank you, Frances. Kara?
I thought this was interesting at the kind of towards the beginning of this, as CWIL was coming out with some of the statements that we were and resources. We were finding that employers were engaging with us as a national association who hadn't necessarily done that before. And in Canada, one of our largest co-op employer as an industry is the accounting industry, which is very regulated, as well as very stuck to particular terms and how they hire, when they hire, that kind of thing. So I had a conversation with one of their with one of the firms, and it was really interesting at the beginning because they were so worried about doing anything remote. They couldn't really wrap their heads around how they were going to have all these students who part of the experience was them being there with other students, and they were really worried it was going to hurt their brand. And I hadn't really even thought about that until they started saying, like, if a student comes in and we're not prepared for them and they have a bad experience, or the experience isn't what they thought, you know, we as institutions could probably relate because we're talking about online and whether we're prepared for students or how prepared we are for them. But their worry was, am I going to do more damage than not by not having everything really slick or understanding how to use technology? And so we just talked about some things that we were hearing from other employers and how they were doing things, and everybody was kind of fumbling through this if they weren't already online. I was so happy to hear that as kind of the weeks went by, they started to think about different ways of doing things, whether that was implementing technology or just having some of the students working on different things that they wouldn't have worked on before. So where they wouldn't have had a student in accounting working groups on a audit, or they wouldn't have had students working together on something, that instead they started putting it to them that they work together, and then that accountability looked a little bit different than the accountability of a supervisor having to be over their shoulder all the time. And one of the things that I had heard as we were going along was, you're not over top of somebody's shoulder when you're in person. It's not like you're standing over top of that person all day long. It's just a matter of how you check in with them. So I really think that the employer community has moved along, come a long way in a short period of time as well. So I just thought that the mind shift was really interesting over the last couple of weeks.
Okay, I want to move to, thank you very much. Oh, Rolene, did you want to add to that?
I just want to add and say that I need to say that the industry in South Africa is also quite on board. I'm using now my university as an example, is specifically for tourism and hospitality, is they have the industry involved. So the industry is using their students. So where the students, they give the students a project the students need to come up with a new idea on how to relaunch their company after COVID-19. So, and even in my project-based learning, the industry are constantly involved with guiding the students and helping the students and mentoring the students. And the same in our accounting environment, the students get an integrated project from the banks, and then they need to work on that problem and solve that problem. And then the winning team at the end then will showcase that through a webinar in a small group with the industry, with the banks, and they will have a conversation around that project. So yeah, I think that the industry are quite on board with COVID-19 and helping and assisting the students. I think they're using the creativity of the students to get new ideas, to get their businesses on par again, and launch their businesses sort of after COVID and to survive.
Okay, that's great. Let's move on to a different topic. There was reference made to there's a difference between virtual will and remote will. We've talked a fair bit about remote and how students are working and employers are working remotely. But a question did come in if anyone has been developing virtual reality spaces where students could learn in a virtual environment, virtual realities. Anybody want to comment on that? Or if they know of any? Rolene?
Yes, I know specifically of our mining department is doing virtual reality with their students. So their students learn in a virtual environment. I don't know specifically how they do it within the COVID environment, but I know before COVID, they have a virtual room where the students will write their exams and do the work integrated learning placement, because then they are tested in that virtual lab and virtual environment. Thanks,
Rolene. Kara, you had your hand.
So this is one of the topics that CWIL is looking at from the Innovation Will support from the federal government, that we are looking to curate the different practices that are happening across Canada. So I don't know a lot about what they're doing at Bow Valley College, but I heard that they are doing some amazing things. I know that Tony Slade talked on the last CWIL call about the College of the North Atlantic, how they are creating some virtual reality labs so that they're able to do some of the hands-on practice within some of their courses, that they can at least get them moving farther along. I know this is a big conversation around nursing labs. And how they could at least do some of the work. So there's work being done there. At Brock, which is my home university, we have a company that's actually out of our incubator. Then they have been working with faculty to develop components of their coursework in a virtual setting. So there's quite a bit that's happening. I think that, again, it kind of talks to, this has sped up the conversation. And it's now finding out who is already on the leading edge of this, and then how do we scale that up so that it's something that's usable for the country.
And Nora, I might add, just from an Australian perspective, that Murdoch University in Western Australia has been doing some work in this, and I've seen it in action, and they've been looking at classrooms and simulating classes of children and interviews with very difficult parents and things like that, very realistically, and very interesting work. So
okay, excellent. Let's move on to the next question. There was a question about, does anyone have some suggestions on how to support faculty who are trying to also adjust to this environment and supporting their work integrated learning programs and students remotely? Any suggestions for faculty and best practices? Christina?
I think the way University of West did this was actually, I think, quite a good way of doing it. It worked in our university context anyway. But we have IKT media lab with 8 people fully employed that makes the technology work, so to speak. And then we assigned 12 people that had an interest in pedagogical technology to develop and actually promote pedagogical technology development. And it means that if these 2 groups work together, so when one teacher came and said, I have this issue, it went to a function email address, and we together discussed who will help this the best. Because sometimes there are technological problems, sometimes it's pedagogical questions. So you need to actually make the faculty go on board and making this good quality experience for the students, as well as some kind of anxiety reducing effects on the staff. I think you need to make sure that there is someone actually monitoring this kind of development strategical way of working. So it's not just say 1 or 2 persons or something like that, but I think you need to see that there are different kinds of persons that need to go into this kind of staff development initiative. And what we did not so good, I think, is from saying from the leadership that it's good enough now, because it's actually a bit contradictory. It's good enough what you're doing, so don't develop. And here you have 12 people that can help you develop.
Okay.
So yeah,
Okay, good. Thanks, Christina. Frances, I think you wanted to say something.
Yeah. So my institution, the University of Central Lancashire, we have a designated team per faculty, so or school, however you term it in your country. So we have a go-to person, and they then make up a collective in terms of how we're supported, because we want to do things from a pedagogic point of view. We want to do things as creatively as possible to engage with the students, because one of the real challenges of this environment is, and like just looking at my screen here, I function by reading body language and engaging with my audience and in the classroom. So how do we really recreate that example and that environment, and where do we draw our energy from when everybody's turned their video off and muted themselves? Because you usually have an environment that is vibrant, dynamic. So we're working really hard to improve that experience for us as an academic working within this environment. And I would, the academics in the room, I'm talking to you, and you know when you're there, you're delivering, and you stop because you think, am I by myself? So we're working with the teams to really start to get those creative, dynamic, enjoyable experiences, not just for the students, but for us.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you very much. That's very thoughtful. I think we have time for one more question, and then we'll do a wrap up. The question is this: has anyone got any tips or suggestions for how to help students who are working across different cultures within this virtual environment?
I would say that some of the best practices we've seen is actually out of UVic. I would say that as one of our CWIL members, and the cultural competencies that have been developed there, over the years under an unknown person, Nora. I think that I would point people to UVic, because I think that there's some really great practices there if you're not aware of them. And I think that we could all learn, and it's something we're gonna have to think about as students are working collaboratively. Think about the nuances that happen in an office space when you're face to face around cultural diversity. And now understanding that in a two-dimensional world will be even more difficult in some ways.
Thanks, Kara. Yeah, and just on that, the work out of UVic is based on the theoretical constructs of cultural intelligence, so CQ. Early and Ang's work, you can look it up. There's stuff in there which is quite useful. Okay, so we're coming to the end. Panelists, any last few words, and then I'll turn it back to Judy to give our wrapping comments before we close. Great job, everyone. Frances, anything you'd like to add?
I'd just like to say thank you very much for the opportunity. From an asset point of view, we are really keen to start developing collaborations across the world. This is an opportunity. Let's take it.
Yes, well, you've come to the right place. Excellent. Christina, did you want to say anything?
Yes, thank you very much all for bearing out with us for 1 hour. I think I will promote the research projects that are in this area through the WACE network. So if you're interested in this kind of research, you can just look out for the newsletter, stuff like that. It will be announced there. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Berlin?
From my side, I want to say thank you very much for the opportunity. And I really think we need to take the best from COVID-19 and not dwell on the negative of COVID-19. Mm-hmm. Let's start innovating and start thinking of better ideas of doing well, because there's so many modalities. We just need to incorporate those modalities. And yes, I think it's actually a positive time and not a negative time for me.
Thanks very much, Berlin. And I think all of us here are leaders in our own communities and in our own institutions. And this is the kind of leadership that our students and employers need to hear from us. So thank you very much for ending on that very positive and inspirational note. Thank you. Judy.
No, one thing, Nora, in the chat, you were busy. Somebody would like you to repeat the reference to the cultural intelligence.
I've done it.
Repeat? Oh, you've done it on the chat. Fabulous. Okay. So I wasn't quick enough. Okay. Well, I've had the pleasure of listening to 7 countries talk about the impacts of COVID-19, and I take the leaf out of Rolene's book. Let's look at the benefits, and we've all know the challenges, but now let's move on. And across both of the hours that we've had today, when we had the Asian session and now this one, people are talking about the resilience, the bending, the flexing. And it's clear that it's all stakeholders involved that are bending and flexing. We're bending and flexing. We're asking the students to, and also the employers. And in both sessions, people talked even more this morning, my morning anyway, talked about, well, let's get rid of the old and let's bring in the new. Not completely, because of course there's a conversation around quality and maintaining that quality. But this is an opportunity to sort of do a spring clean, if you like, and work out what do we want to keep and what do we want to get rid of. And so the other theme that came through today in this session also was just the opportunities for collaboration. I've had the joy of looking at the chat. We've got people connecting in the chat right now, right in this very moment, making connections, collaborating, exchanging emails. It's fantastic. We've seen it happening between institutions. We've seen it happening between regions. So Australia and New Zealand have been doing webinars together. By the way, all of them are on the ASIN website, completely open. You can look at all the webinars. All the recordings are there. You're very welcome. And now between even more countries. So the collaboration, the collegiality, all in it together is something we really need to think about. And I think some of the other themes were the opportunities for the creativity, for the enterprise, and moving forward for the sort of attributes we need to build. This unprecedented time is giving us the opportunity to build the sort of characteristics and attributes that our students we already knew they needed, but now they really need it, and so do we. And so this is a real opportunity moving forward. So I just want to finish by thanking the panelists we've had, I think, a very rich conversation today, and to have some really some contrasting scenarios happening in various countries, but some common themes has been fantastic. In about 5 minutes, I'll be sending you a survey, literally, where you can put in your feedback about this session and also what you'd like to see from future sessions, because we're planning future sessions and opportunities for more collaboration globally. We're recording this, as you know, and that will be available on the website. I think what happened was that we might have maxed out at 100. So you may find that people weren't able to get into the session. So we apologise for that. We had no idea that we would actually be limited in some way. So if you've got colleagues that missed out, please tell them that the recording will be available and that you will get information about further sessions. So on that note, for me, good night. For some of you, good morning. And for the rest of you, enjoy your day. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
I love the way that